G'day, Professor Joseph Drew, here with our new puppy, who's helping me to record the video. This video is about why not? Why don't our politicians and public policy architects admit when they've made policy mistakes and fix them? It's really interesting. Don't know if you ever thought about it, but someone asked me this question lately and I did. And there's a lot more to it than what you might suppose. Now, William H. Riker, one of the most famous political scientists of our age, wrote about this at length, actually, not in this book, it's in quite an obscure chapter in another book, but never mind. The name's up there if you want to check up on this bloke. And he said, well, politicians are in a bit of a bind about changing policy direction or admitting mistakes. Often, the political party has an ideology that they need to subscribe to and continue to support, otherwise they could well find themselves out of the party. Often the party has a position and they need to toe the line. Also, in politics it can be risky to admit that you've made a mistake. Our media likes to portray people as strong leaders because they never change their mind and they never do anything wrong. But reality is that people do make mistakes. But that doesn't go over well in the media. So there's a political risk in admitting that you have indeed done the wrong thing. I think another very big problem, certainly in my interactions with politicians and department heads in local government policy mistakes, is that people fail to see the real human cost and the real human implications of their mistake. They think in terms of policy, they think in terms of cost, they think in terms of political risk. What they're not doing is thinking in terms of people. And you recall that Socrates in the death accounts of Socrates by Plato, we are told that he says, look, you need to stop caring about the city's possessions and start caring about the city's people. That's the purpose of government, is the people. And I've heard first-hand accounts of the terrible cost, the terrible human toll of some of these failed public policies, particularly amalgamation. That's what I've had a lot of exposure to of late. Now, I've had staff tell me about suicide attempts and drug abuse and family breakups and tremendous stress. I've had political representatives tell me the same thing. I know of people who have had terrible financial consequences because of policy mistakes. And I think if more of our policy decision makers, our politicians and our department heads were actually talking to real life human beings and putting faces and real life stories to their policies, they would make very, very different decisions. We need to stop thinking about public policy and stop thinking about things and stop thinking about dollars and start thinking about people. Another big reason why policymakers are often disinclined to admit their mistakes and reverse the policies is that they're worried about risks. They're worried about what would happen if we did admit the amalgamations were a mistake. You know, does that put the kibosh on future amalgamations? Does that encourage more communities to actively campaign for de-amalgamation? Would that expose us to legal contests? Would that expose us to the potential to have to compensate communities for our bad policy mistake? So I think there's a lot of consideration about the risks on the downside of admitting a mistake and reversing the policy. You know, there is some discussion, but I don't think it's a real motivation, some discussion about the risk of de-amalgamation. And if that is really what they're focusing on, they need to stop and reflect on the fact that we've done 5 de-amalgamations very, very successfully in Australia. So I'm not sure that that is really what's holding them back on the risk side. But if it is, it's probably not a good reason. What they're not doing is thinking about the other side of the coin, the risk of not doing something, the risk that there will be possibly, sadly, more psychological injuries as a result of the failed policy. That the risk that there possibly will be more amalgamated councils having to go into administration. The risk that there possibly will be more massive increases in local government rates. 53% in Cootamundra Gundagai, 58%, I think, in Armidale. There have been massive increases. The risk that more of these amalgamated councils will continue to have very large deficits year after year after year, and eventually they will run out of unrestricted cash. So there's a lot of risk and potential blame through doing nothing. And I think it would be good if the public policy architects, the decision makers, contemplate who might get the right blame if they do nothing, particularly when they've been given evidence to show that there is a real problem. They've been given evidence that there is a real solution that's been enacted in the past quite successfully. Look, I outline in great detail the de-amalgamation process, the theory, the practicalities of it. It's not simple, I'm not suggesting it is, but it's been done 5 times before in Australia, so it certainly is possible. Some people in New South Wales are trying to pretend it's not possible. Of course it is, if it's been done before. It is a risk, it would be a difficult job. I've even offered to do it for one of the communities because I cared so much about the community, and I was willing to take the blame if anything went wrong. And this is also one of the problems, is who's going to do it? It's a terrible job, not going to be highly remunerated. You're bound to get blamed and stressed by someone. I'm still willing to do it for communities. If that's the difference, we can't get someone to stand up and lead the process. I'm still willing to do it if it means less harm for people and better outcomes for actual humans. I've also gone through this theory and the problems that we have with our public policies, with making the public policy mistakes in the first case, which was in my earlier video, and also not wanting to admit when we've made mistakes and rectify our mistakes. And I go through that in my forthcoming book, Creating Human Value. Look, I go through all of this with one intent: to get people to think, to get people to understand the issues, and to get better outcomes for people. Look, thank you very much for your time. And Leibniz here, Gottfried Leibniz, my son's dog, also thanks you for the time. Thank you very much. Goodbye.